Hello, fifth graders. I hope you're having a great day. I am Dr. Delosier, and I will be reading and analyzing the text with you for the selection, Night of the Spadefoot Toads. Have you ever heard of Spadefoot Toads? One thing I do when I begin a new book is ask questions that will help my focus better while I'm reading. One question that comes to my mind is, what is a Spadefoot toad? What is the difference between toads and frogs? Another might be, how many different kinds of toads are there? Where is their natural habitat? As you can see, my focus was on spadefoot toads. What questions did you have? Let's see if we can answer some of these questions as we read. If you do not already have a journal or notebook and a pen or pencil, please pause the video and get them now. Good readers take notes as they read. So let's practice this as we go. Today, I'll help you with some things you want to note. Our learning targets today are, we will compare and contrast two or more characters in a story. We will do this by identifying characteristic traits of two or more characters. Today, it will be especially Frankie and Ben. We will create a Venn diagram to document our findings. We're also going to identify the theme of the story from details in the text, including how the characters in the story respond to challenges. We will identify the details in the story that connect the characters, and we will be successful as we communicate our ideas. We will use the Venn diagram. As you see, we will be comparing and contrasting the characters Frank and Ben. In your journal, I would like for you to make two columns, one with the heading Frank or Frankie, and the other Ben. We will be noting characteristics of them as we read. You also might want to document major challenges the characters face as we read. Night of the Spadefoot Toads by Bill Harley. That new teacher, Mrs. Tibbets, is 100 years old. You'll see, Frankie announces. 200 years old, another boy says. Ben Maroney ignores them as he heads down the hall. Jenny Ferreira is walking beside him. The other kids in his fifth grade class are stretched out in a loose line up and down the hall, heading to science class. Mrs. Tibbets isn't that old, Jenny tells Ben, and she's not a new teacher. She's just been out for a while. My brother had her in fifth grade a couple of years ago. I'm going to pause for a minute. Do you know of a teacher that maybe you've had or your siblings had and then they were out for a couple of years and then they came back? Wonder why they left. Ben nods. He likes Jenny. She's one of the few kids who talk to him, maybe just because he sits behind her in class. He's been at Edenborough Elementary School for 2 months, but he still feels new. Now they've got a new teacher too. She's new to Ben at least. Everybody else in the class seems to know her. So who are the characters so far in the story? Would you say Mrs. Tibbets is? Why or why not? We do know Frankie, Ben, and Jenny are definitely characters. Would we mention the boy that said 200 years old? At this time, I would say he's a minor character, just appear in the class, and I wouldn't really list him as a character. So let's continue. I would suggest you pause and write the other main characters we read about. There are only a few more in this chapter. She's 1,000,000 years old, Frankie shouts so everyone in the hall can hear. He bends over and hobbles down the hall like an old woman, and Tommy Miller and Dennis DeMeo laugh. Frankie thinks he's a lot funnier than he is, but there are always kids who will laugh at him, even when he's being mean. It's strange to get a new science teacher at the end of March. Ben wonders where Mrs. Tibbets has been, and more importantly, why she came back. When Ben walks into the classroom, he doesn't see the science teacher, but he does see the mice. They're in a new cage on a table against the back wall, next to stacks of textbooks and papers. He figures there are half a dozen mice in it. So there are new characters like friends of Frankie. Can you tell me why I say that? What evidence in the text tells you that they are probably friends of Frankie's? And why do you think the others are telling Ben about Mrs. Tibbets? Why do they know about her and he doesn't? Ben knows something about mice, but not as pets. He knows about mice as food for diamondback rattlesnakes. He's been a rattlesnake, he's seen rattlesnakes eat mice lots of times. There are no diamondback rattlesnakes in Edenboro, Massachusetts. Ben's pretty sure of that. The rattlesnakes he used to watch were at the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona, where he lived until February, along with whip snakes and sidewinders and horned toads and chuckwalla lizards. All he's seen since they moved to Massachusetts are some squirrels and chipmunks in his backyard and some birds at the end of the window feeder. So why do you think Ben knows about rattlesnakes, particularly diamondback rattlesnakes? And what evidence do you have about to prove your answer? Ben walks to the cage to get a closer look at the mice. Ryan Brisson starts pounding on a desk not far from the table. Ben! Ben! He yells. Sit here! With a new teacher, there aren't any rules yet, and everyone is thinking they can sit anywhere they want. Frankie, Tommy, and Dennis have claimed desks all together on the other side of the room. Ryan's a skinny little kid who wears glasses. One of the lenses is covered with a patch, and the other lens magnifies his good eye. He's always peering at people out of that one big eye. He's the most hyper kid that Ben has ever met. It's like his mother gives him a pound of sugar right before he leaves for school every day. He drives Ben crazy. He drives the other kids crazy. He even drives the teacher crazy. Ryan is another character in a story. Because his name is specifically mentioned, I think I will note his name on my characters chart. How do you think Ben feels about Ryan? Do you think Ben will sit with Ryan? Why or why not? Ben wishes he had a real friend, not like Jenny, who only talks to him because she sits in front of him, or Ryan, who is officially wacko. He'd like to find someone like Toby, his best friend back in Tucson. Sit here, Ryan says again, pounding on the desk like a bass drum. It's the only empty seat. The kid is a human noise machine. He'd be noisy even if he were sitting still, which he never is. Ben glances around the room. The new teacher, Mrs. Tibbets, hasn't arrived yet. Teachers are usually pretty good about not leaving a classroom unattended, but sometimes it happens. He looks at the mice again, then thinks about Mr. Tompkins, the director of the children's the director of the children's programs at the Desert Museum. Ben loved that museum. He'd taken every summer class they offered for his age group and talked his parents into taking him there almost every Saturday during the school year. Mr. Tompkins had promised Ben that when he was a little older, he could help out with one of the summer programs. But then in December, Ben's dad was offered a new job, and 2 months later, his family packed up and left Tucson. Now he's stuck here, looking at mice in Massachusetts. He doesn't even have his souvenirs from the museum. The box that held his favorite things from his bedroom got lost in the move, and the moving company can't find it. Ryan is still pounding the desk calling for Ben, but it's like the kid who has forgotten what he really wants and now just enjoys the sound of his own pounding and chanting. Here, 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 he says. Ryan Brisson! Frankie Murley shouts in a creaky voice. Ryan Brisson, could you kindly shut your trap for once in your life? He's still imitating an old woman. Dennis and Tommy and a couple of other boys who always laugh at Frankie's jokes let out loud guffaws. Mrs. Tibbets still hasn't arrived, and the kids are all standing up and talking and making noise. The longer there's not a teacher in the room, the wilder it gets. Even the mice in the cage are agitated now, running around like the students in the room. Ben knows how to handle mice. He undoes the latch. So what do we notice about Frankie? Do you think maybe Frankie might be a little bit more than mean? Wonder what we would say he is. Oh, let me back up just for a minute. He undoes the latch, reaches in and scoops one up in his hand. The then latches the door shut. He lets the mouse run from one hand to another, putting each hand in front of one that's holding it. Hey, wow, what are you doing? Ryan jumps out of his seat and skips over to where Ben is holding the mouse. Are you supposed to do that? No way, another kid says. Old Mrs. Tibbets will kill you. They're probably for a science experiment or something. Other kids gather around. Ben is holding the mouse close to his face, looking at its twitching nose and bright eyes. He thinks about how the workers at the museum fed the mice to snakes. At first, he was upset, but Mr. Tompkins had explained that it was all part of the life cycle. It's sad, he said, but all species depend on other forms of life to survive or live. That's why there are so many mice, to make sure the species survives. Of course, we're at the top of the food chain. There are a lot of us, but that's because there's no one to eat us. You should put it back, Jenny says to Ben, before Mrs. Tibbets gets here. She's twisting her fingers in her hair like she's the one who's going to be in trouble. It's okay, Ben says. I just want to see it for a minute. Ryan reaches for the mouse, trying to get it out of Ben's hands. Let me hold him, he says. I'll be careful. No, Ryan, Ben says, twisting around to shield the mouse. Ryan manages to grab Ben's wrist with one hand. I'm going to pause for a minute. What characteristics do we know about Jenny? How do we know that? And Ryan, he's annoying, he's hyper. What else? You know, I would say he's persistent. He doesn't give up when he gets an idea to do or say something. Don't forget to write down your characters and their traits, particularly Ben's and Frankie's. Wait, Ben yells, but Ryan clamps down on the little animal with his other hand. Afraid the mouse will be crushed, Ben lets go. Ryan lifts it up in the air like it's a trophy or something. I've got it, he shrieks. It's squirmy. Well, duh, Frankie sneers. Well, duh, three other boys echo. Ryan tries to hold on to the mouse, but it crawls out of his hands and runs down his arm. Ah! He yells, and the whole class starts screaming. The mouse leaps off Ryan's arm, lands on the floor, and skitters under the desk, looking for a safe place to hide. But there's no safe place. Not with a bunch of fifth graders after it. Get it! Get it! Frankie shouts in his old woman voice. Killer mouse on the loose! 3 or 4 kids squeal and run to the opposite side of the room, like it really is a killer mouse and might hurt them. It climbed on my arm! Get it! Get it! Ryan is dancing around the circle of kids who are on their hands and knees looking for the mouse. 3 or 4 of them corner it in the front of the room. I'll get it, Ben says, pushing his way through the crowd. He's about to scoop it up when another voice yells out, and everybody freezes where they are. What is going on in here? Ben turns to see a woman standing in the door of the classroom. Why do you think Frankie yelled out, "Killer mouse on the loose"? Does that go along with how we view his character traits? Who do you think has come into the room? Do you think the students will be in trouble? Why? What do you think is going to happen? You will need to finish reading Chapter 1, pages 7 through 10. You may use the slideshow to finish Chapter 1, or you may log in to ReadyGen and use the online reader to finish Chapter 1. Then, please compare and contrast Frankie and Ben in a Venn diagram. Your teacher may have provided the Seesaw app to complete your Venn diagram instead of paper and pencil. Be ready to discuss your comparisons as well as the characters and how they responded to the challenge of the missing teacher. Here are the slides. Thank you for reading with me. I can't wait to read chapter 2 and see what happens. Bye.